Joining me today on Brief Encounters is Chantelle Zemba, General Counsel of Deliveroo. Thrilled to have you here. Welcome, Chantelle.
Hi, Richard. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Chantelle, when we first met, which was a few years ago, it was
Yeah.
really the early days of Deliveroo. We're going to spend some time today talking about the team now and what this
Uh-huh.
amazing thing has become. But just take us back to those days of 2016 and 2017. How did you get into all of this?
So I was advising Deliveroo externally. I was a corporate lawyer in a law firm, and I met them back in 2013, 2014. And one of our other private equity clients was an investor in Deliveroo, friends and family round. And he kind of came to us and said, he has this friend and a small company and they need help doing their first Series A round. And could we kind of give them mates rates? And so that's how it all started. So I got given the job, had never done a VC deal before. And I met Will and Greg, and kind of the rest is history. We kind of grew from there.
And I remember it's so funny to think back to those days where I remember your office in Tottenham Court Road, and there was usually a lot of riders in the office. There was a sort
Yeah.
of combination of legal work and also kind of food delivery. And it seems like a long time ago, but what an
Yeah.
exciting time it must have been.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, we didn't even really have an office for the lawyers. So I remember, a lot of our meetings were done in the stairwell of the building, doing things on the floor. So it was really kind of gritty and hands-on, but a lot of fun.
And when you joined, what was the first area of responsibility you took on?
So because the company was sort of doing loads of funding rounds every 8 months, 10 months, I was primarily working on that. But because at the same time, we kind of started becoming a bit more high profile, and there were a lot of kind of the issues, the kind of rider issues that were cropping up, the employment issues. And so because everybody was focused on that, everything else kind of came my way, to be honest. And so, although my training was in corporate law, I just ended up really picking up everything else. And that was a real blessing in a way, because it enabled me to kind of learn about the business quickly and gain a bit of confidence by dipping into things that were outside of my specialty area.
It's such a sort of magic thing when you've come from a firm and been so specialized.
Yeah.
And you think you had till I think it's around 2019 where
Yeah.
the team's grown to a few headcount. I think something like 10,
Yeah.
and you're asked to be general counsel.
Yeah.
Tell us about that transition.
It was pretty tricky, actually, because it wasn't something I expected, and it also wasn't something that I thought I would do. I was really happy being a corporate lawyer, and I really loved M&A stuff, and I really didn't think that I would be able to transition and suddenly look after a whole legal team that were doing all sorts of different types of law, not only in the UK, but globally. So it wasn't something, that I naturally thought that I would want to do. But I think it was really important that I think it was in the decision-making process. It was really my manager at the time who played a key role in that. And she really encouraged me to do it. She saw my potential and believed in me and really kind of pushed me into it in a good way. And it was just what I needed to say yes. So I said yes reluctantly at the time, but really saying yes and I guess being confident in that because she believed that I could do it.
And it's such a difficult time in a career, right, where
Yeah.
in the end, no one actually trains you to be a general
Right.
counsel.
Yeah.
You kind of learn it, and it's amazing to have that mentorship.
Yeah, it's so important, especially I think the best type of roles are stretch roles. and and provided you have the support system around you, it's amazing what you can really achieve in those stretch roles. So yeah, that was a transformative point in my career, and I'll always be grateful for that.
And thinking, I guess we're now 5 years later.
Yeah.
Tell us about how big the team has grown today, and what legal at Deliveroo looks like in 2024.
Yeah, so it's so different. When I became general counsel, we had 10 lawyers in the team. And it wasn't really kind of a full service team. We didn't have all the kind of specialty areas that we needed. Now we have 63 lawyers, and we've built out a full service team. But it was actually the scaling of the team was just such a hard process to go through, because we had lots of external things happening at the time, like COVID and um, the IPO. We had a CMA investigation, so lots of
Very
big
relaxing few
things.
years.
Yeah, lots of big things happening. But and then in order to kind of hire in the right people for the team that you're trying to build, we were, that's hard, right? And you have to be picky. So we were doing like over 300 interviews a year on top of just, all of our other stuff. So it was a real challenge scaling in a high quality way. We definitely weren't just kind of blindly hiring for the sake of it or for the sake of growing.
And how did you go about building the team? I mean, there's obviously a huge breadth of things that now need to be covered in an organization the size, but where did you start, and what were the building blocks for you to kind of get to this 63 strong team?
Yeah, so I think so there was like, we knew that we needed more people because of the volume of work. So, that was a given. But in terms of the types of people, a lot of thought went into that. And I sort of started with, okay, what are the types of problems that we get as a legal team from this type of business? And therefore, given those types of problems, what is it that what environment do we need to create in order to be able to solve those types of problems? And because we're a disruptor, because we're growing so quickly, because we're a tech company, there are particular types of problems that come along with that. And, in the context of Deliveroo, we needed people who were innovative. We needed people with a growth mindset. We needed people who were resilient. And so that really dictated the culture that I, needed to set, and then finding people who would fit within that.
And one of the things I've kind of noticed about the team is I think you were fairly early into building legal operations and folks who weren't, PQE lawyers. Tell us a little bit about that investment and kind of what that's enabled you to do versus, just have qualified lawyers in the team.
Yeah, so we took a while actually to kind of get to the point where we thought we needed legal operations, and I think that's not going to be something you do on day one. But as the team scaled and became bigger, something that was really important to us was quality control and high performance culture, and so having a legal operations function has helped us to do that, to maintain the quality that we had when the team was smaller, as it grows. And so that was really the key thing. Now I think we're sort of evolving it even more to, potentially look at getting data analysts into the team so that we can think about, okay, like, let's start collecting data in the team. Let's look at like what are the pressure points, throughout the year where the business needs help or dealing with particular problems. What do our KPIs look like within the team today? Is there any spots that we can optimize on? Does that affect the way that we hire? So that's where we're kind of evolving to. But when we initially set it up, and it still plays that role today, it helps us to maintain the quality and kind of high performance of the team.
And for the perception of legal within the business, I mean, it sounds like you had this strong relationship already with the CEO in the early days, and legal has been kind of a pivotal part of growth.
Mhm.
But how do you go about, ensuring the centrality of legal and ensuring that the work you do is visible and valued and present and reported within the org?
So I think the way that I think about this is, just sort of your kind of normal lawyers, I think about them as almost being like plumbers, and they're beavering away and kind of fixing all the pipes in a building, and you don't really know if something is wrong unless a pipe bursts and whatever. So that's good, and everybody should be good at that. But I think where legal really starts to add value is if, I like to imagine a racing car going along a racetrack, and you have the driver, and legal can be that strategy person next to the driver, clearing the way to help that car move at pace and anticipate the next turn or whatever. And once you kind of, if legal can move into that role, then I think that's really where you start to see the true value in a legal function in-house. And so that would be, where I would like to move any team to start playing that strategic role. And you don't really need to prove anything other than delivering on that. And you naturally will get your place in the business because you're delivering that value to them.
And it's such a good analogy and so energizing also for the junior lawyers to see
Yeah.
the impact that you're having.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, working with founders. This is something my GC and I talk about a lot, but
Yeah.
the hyper growth company, you've got a lot of international expansion, all kinds of things happening. How have you kind of managed those relationships with the senior execs in the team to ensure that, scale is happening, but it's happening in a legally responsible way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I always, one, like to explain why something, why you might be taking a particular approach on something, because people are more likely to do what you want if they actually understand why. And then I always like to take a super balanced view and show that we've done the thinking around, what if you didn't do it? What if you did kind of went in a kind of, extreme compliant way? What's the thing, what's the kind of way down the middle that kind of takes into account everybody's considerations but still gets us to the outcome that we all sort of want? So I always find that, explaining clearly what it is that you want people to do and why, and that also understands a deep dive on, the risks and understanding the risks super clearly, and then kind of demonstrating that you've thought about all the different things, which backs up why you need to go down, route 3 or whatever. And then I also think I also like to be quite bold in giving my view, as opposed to sitting on the fence and just burdening the business with a bunch of options and leaving them to, make the decisions alone. I really like to help them make those decisions by giving my very strong views on what I think should happen. Because there's nothing, I know myself as a kind of on the exec here, if people are coming to me with loads of information, it can be really overwhelming. And you're sitting there trying to make this decision. And that can be really overwhelming. And so a helpful thing to do is to try and do some of that thinking for people and package it up so that you make it really easy for them to make decisions.
Very cool. Thinking about the team size now,
Yeah.
I'm imagining you have a different set of challenges from when you were 10 people and you were
Yeah.
all working on the floor or wherever it was.
Yeah.
But how do you maintain alignment in culture now within the legal team? And what are the kind of ceremonies and things you do to ensure that you're rowing in the same direction?
So I think that I spent a lot of time, I guess, thinking about my leadership purpose, what it is that I wanted to do. And I communicated that really clear to everybody. And then off the back of that, creating a team mission. So, it's inevitable when your team is at a certain size, people are going to be off doing lots of different things. You're not going to necessarily know everything, right? But what we can align around is a team mission and why are we here? What is it that we're trying to do? So we spent a lot of time creating a really specific culture for this team and communicating that, in lots and lots of different ways. So we are focused on unlocking opportunity, directing the business. We think of ourselves as problem solvers, not just lawyers. So it breaks down all the barriers of like pigeonholing you into specialties. And we're the team that thrives in adversity. And we are the best leaders and we create the best leaders. So that's a culture that we all kind of live and breathe. We start off every year with a strategy day where we go over that culture again, but then we talk about the company goals and aligning the team's goals to the company goals. We have a big wrap up at the end of the year, and then we have monthly all hands meetings and sub team meetings every 2 weeks. And everything that we do is centered around those culture points.
I really like that point. I think around starting with why, right? So in both of those examples, it's so powerful. Very interesting. What's gone wrong? I mean, what are the sort of along the way? What have been the kind of the hiring mistakes or the enablement mistakes you look back on and learn from and iterated on?
I think recruitment is really hard, right? Like I think that when you're trying to scale at pace, and not only that, but kind of make sure you're hiring the right people for your culture and what it is that you need to achieve. You obviously make mistakes along the way, and you can get into quite desperate moments where you're like, I just need to make this hire and da-da-da. And that's always a dangerous position to be in, because I think you become vulnerable to kind of being persuaded by recruiters or whoever it might be. And sometimes you can be taken away from your own sort of intuition on something. And that leads to bad decision making, I think. And so you can, so certainly in my past, I've made the wrong hires, even though I knew that, there was something not quite right, but I did it anyway.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. And then you kind of also, there's been times where I've overlooked internal promotion, where it wasn't like an obvious thing, but actually if I had have just looked a bit harder and seen that there was that sort of transferable skill set there, they were kind of right in front of your eyes. And so, and then another mistake is actually promoting too early. And so you don't want to set people up to fail. And so it's really it has to be quite a thoughtful process, I think, before you promote and making sure that people are going to succeed in the role. So those are probably things that I've had to learn the hard way along the way, and making loads and loads of mistakes on that to figure out what really works.
And one of the things I was really curious about was the mindset of the lawyers that you're hiring and the folks in the legal team, where you mentioned this kind of growth mindset and folks who are kind of creative, comfortable with risk. How do you go about testing for that in an interview process, and how have you kind of built the muscle to spot that?
Yeah. So we'll do quite specific testing depending on what specialty it is. We'll give different scenarios and really test someone's relationship with risk in specific scenarios. And the only way to do that is to really drill down into these specific things and see how people will respond and what their kind of natural instincts will be. And look, you still make mistakes even by doing that. And so I think it's not just interviewing, but then when you decide to hire that person, we actually specifically train people, to kind of be innovative and approach problems with a growth mindset. So I think it's a constant kind of thing that you have to work on.
I mean, we talked a lot about, adapting the team for this scale, or also curious about, for you yourself, have you changed, and has your leadership style kind of remained the same, or have you iterated, and sort of what have you been learning kind of about yourself over the last few
Yeah.
years?
I think fundamentally, I am the same. So my core principles are the same. I value high performance. I value hard work. I value, leading by example and doing things. You're never above, any job in the team. So I think those have stayed the same. But probably I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, I've focused a lot more on understanding leadership and just literally doing my own research on it. I think, especially being a lawyer, if in a law firm environment, I don't know, you just kind of progress through the ranks. Suddenly, one day, your partner. I'm not sure that there's a lot of focus on leadership, but actually, it's a skill in and of itself. It's a thing. It's a topic. It's something that needs to be researched. You need to practice it. You need to learn how to be good at it. Just like anything else, just like any kind of legal skill. And so I think I've now come to realize the value of it, and I treat it just as seriously as I would treat an M&A deal or anything. I treat it with that level of seriousness. So yeah, I spend a lot of time researching, and a lot of time on figuring out how I help my management team and the rest of the team grow to be leaders.
It's such a powerful thing just going out and researching it, because,
Yeah.
coming from a firm background as well, there's a lot of training. So you sort of wait for the
Yeah.
training and get training, but
Yeah.
actually, no one really teaches you this stuff unless you
No.
grab it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I do think it's worth treating it as a separate thing. And that is why in our cultural, our cultural kind of values, we have in there, we are the best leaders and we create the best leaders, to make it just as important as our problem solving skills or whatever. It has a place right up there with everything else.
And Deliveroo now, remains a very tech forward business. I mean, I think when we were first meeting years ago, it was evident then, right? There was a lot of
Yeah,
early adoption of technology happening.
yeah.
Tell us about that within the legal team. Like, what for you have you focused on as regards technology, and kind of what's made a difference?
So I think we've obviously partnered with Duro for a long time now,
I
and
think the entire duration of your
yeah,
Deliveroo career
yeah,
for
it's
quite a
so
while.
funny. Yeah, it's actually funny because I do, um, I remember you starting Duro, and
Yeah.
I kind of just started Deliveroo at the same time, and so we've been going along that growth journey together, I guess.
And actually, I do remember that I think you were the legal counsel who was marking up our original contract, ironically, back in the
That
day.
is true. Yeah, so it's this is almost poetic that we get to
Yeah.
chat.
We're both
Um,
still here.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, so we have relied on Jiro quite a lot, and I think our relationship has deepened over the years. But I think Jiro has really helped us to kind of manage all of our standard like templates, but give the business power to kind of move things along themselves without legal having to be so involved. And so that's really helped us as a legal team to focus on the bigger ticket items in the business, and actually play a more strategic role, which I was talking about before, because it allows you to put your very good resources onto that type of work. So yeah, that's been really important for us. And then, as I say, like forming the kind of legal ops team, and then finding different efficiencies within the team, and then hopefully we're going to evolve that into another thing, in the near future as well. But that said, I mean, we're not, although Deliveroo is a tech company, it's not like we've made loads of massive investments into tech as a legal team. I think a lot of what we do is actually quite bespoke and requires a lot of, thinking. But where we can optimize, I think we have done that.
And it's really refreshing because I think, most podcasts about legal now are exclusively about AI. And of course, there's a lot of compelling and interesting things. But in the end, the technology doesn't matter so much, right? It's what it enables you as a team to achieve.
For sure. Yeah.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Just coming up to time, would love to ask one last question, which is, what are your top 3 tips looking back at the last few years to go and build a successful legal team?
So I think you definitely need to have a strong leadership purpose, really sit back and take some time to think about that. What is it that you're trying to achieve and what's authentic to you? What makes you an interesting leader? And don't try to mimic others. And off the back of that, build a strong culture so that it's all in alignment. And that will give the team a powerful mission. The next thing is hiring high quality people into key roles. You've really got to get those, figure out what your key roles are, hire good people, and those people will create really good teams underneath them. And then I also truly believe in active performance management to make sure that you keep if high performance is what you're optimizing for, then actively performance managing is key.
Well, Chantelle, thank you so much for being on Brief Encounters, and congrats on an amazing journey. I think 6 or 7 or 8 years at Deliveroo is probably the same as 50 years in a company that's slower moving. So amazing what you've achieved.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.